Thank you, Kurt. Here's what's happening in the region. Protests have been held across Brazil as thousands of public workers take part in a general strike against a government proposal to reform pensions. The strike, the first since far-right President Jair Bolsonaro took office in January, has affected public transport, schools, and banks, the BBC reported. Police used stun grenades on protesters in Rio de Janeiro. In several cities, roads were blocked with burning tires. Mr. Bolsonaro says the controversial reform will restore public finances. The plan includes raising the minimum requirement age to 65 for men and 62 for women, and workers' contributions. Critics argue that the changes, which have to be approved by both houses of Congress, would penalize the poorest. On the night before the final day of the Venezuelan migrant registration process, a protest erupted outside the Queen's Park Oval in Port of Spain, triggering a police response led by Commissioner Gary Griffith. Close the borders, the protesters chanted, as Griffith met and spoke with several people, warning of the danger of demonstrating at night and warning them to stay off the road. Call the election and Rowley must go, others yelled, according to the Express. Friday marked the final day of the 2-week-long registration process that government has ordered, which will give Venezuelan nationals the right to seek employment on a temporary basis. The Queen's Park Oval is one of 3 registration centers, which have all been overwhelmed by the number of Venezuelans seeking to register. There have been calls for the registration deadline to be extended, but this is being rejected by government. There is no accurate count of how many Venezuelans have crossed over into Trinidad, fleeing the economic and political chaos in Venezuela. Mexico has not accepted that the United States send it an unlimited number of asylum seekers, Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said ahead of meetings with U.S. officials to determine the expansion of a controversial program. Under pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump, Mexico agreed last week to expand the program, which forces mostly Central American asylum seekers to return to Mexico to await the outcome of their U.S. asylum claims. According to Reuters, Ebrard said officials would discuss which cities the program, known as Remain in Mexico, would expand to, as well as to how to measure the number of people and which nationalities Mexico would accept. Internationally, the U.S. military has released a video which it says shows Iranian special forces removing an unexploded mine from the side of an oil tanker damaged in an attack in the Gulf of Oman on Thursday. The U.S. also released images of the Japanese tanker apparently showing the unexploded mine before it was removed. A Norwegian tanker in the Gulf also reported being hit by 3 blasts, according to the BBC. The U.S. accused Iran of being behind the attacks. Iran said it categorically rejected the allegation. The blasts came a month after 4 oil tankers were damaged in an attack off the coast of the United Arab Emirates. The U.S. blamed Iran for that attack, but did not produce evidence. Iran also denied those accusations. The World Health Organization, WHO, has decided not to declare a global emergency over the Ebola crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. According to the BBC, the WHO said Ebola was very much an emergency in the region, but it did not pose a global threat. However, it was damning of countries for giving less than half the money needed to deal with the disease. The deadly outbreak, which is the second largest in history, has killed more than 1,400 people. This week, cases were detected across the border in Uganda, though the virus is not yet spreading there. Declaring a public health emergency of international concern is one of the most important acts the WHO can take. It has done so only 4 times before, including for the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, which killed more than 11,000 people. Such a decision usually means getting more money in healthcare workers to tackle an outbreak, or political support to stop the fighting to let the medics get the job done. A number of Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam's advisors have urged her to delay plans for a controversial change in extradition laws. However, others still back the process, and there is no evidence Ms. Lam intends to delay. The BBC reported that key advisor Bernard Chan favored a pause as the intense divisions made it impossible to push on. Protests were held this week to oppose a bill that could see some criminal suspects extradited to mainland China. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets on Sunday and Wednesday. Dozens of people were injured when Wednesday's demonstration turned violent. Hong Kong is a former British colony but was returned to Chinese rule in 1997 under a one-country, two-systems deal that guarantees it a level of autonomy. And that brings us to the end of regional and international headlines. Back to you, Kurt.